here are really some of the basic symbols: the bindu, the umphalos, the goddess in the frame drum, and these are the core of these mysteries. The way that I got into all this was that I started to study the frame drum, and my teacher had started collecting images of ancient frame drummers from the Mediterranean world. He collected about 200 slides. This is Glenn. And I started organizing them for him because I majored in art and I had been a photographer. He only had one copy. I was duplicating the slides and I was studying them, and it takes you a while to realize these things, but I go, they're all women. You know, what's going on? Because I was one of the few women at that time in the circle that I was in that I met that was studying percussion. And that was in 1980, 1981. So the drum is what led me into all this, and the drum is incredibly, ultimately linked with all these traditions. The symbols that I started finding on the drums and on the connected ritual objects, it was like a crossword puzzle. You know, I had to, it took many years of putting the information together and before it fit into any kind of coherent whole. But what I began to realize, well, first of all, when I saw all these women playing the drums, I thought, who were they? Who were they? So I'd started to study the inscriptions, and it turned out that many were goddesses or priestesses. So I had to figure out why were they holding the drum. Now, I had started studying yoga when I was 17, 1970, and I got involved in meditation and Buddhism, and I knew the iconography from Hindu and Buddhist religious symbols. So, and I saw enough correlation between what I was finding in the ancient Mediterranean world and those traditions to know that they were holding the same meaning. Plus, the cultures were in communication. There was a lot of communication between India and Asia and the Mediterranean world. In fact, Alexander the Great conquered into parts of India. So there was a lot of similarity of thoughts. So I used those traditions to piece things together. So what I realized was when a goddess or god holds something, it's an attribute of consciousness. So the goddesses were holding the drum because it was an attribute of consciousness, of spirituality. And I began to realize that it represented the first sound that brings everything into manifestation, that brings reality into being, out of the void, out of the emptiness, out of the field of all consciousness. I found these Neolithic goddesses throughout Anatolia and Greece that represent the void. They are the void. They are the source of everything. So these were often in burials. So this is around 3000 BCE. These incredibly potent little figurines of the source of everything, which is the void. It's the emptiness out of which everything comes. So when they buried people, they were going back into that source. This is a yantra from the yogic tradition in India. And a yantra is a geometric shape designed to hold the mind for meditation, to concentrate the mind on. So you focus on this shape and you release thoughts. And you just keep focusing on the shape. So what this is the dot and the cinder is the bindu. We're going to hear a lot about the bindu. And then the power that brings manifestation out of the void, out of the bindu, which is the compacted, unmanifested energy of the universe, is the power of desire. So that's why we find arrows often around the edges of things in all these traditions, often playing a frame drum. But it's this power of desire between, and archetypally speaking, between male and female, that brings the surrounding, expanding circle of everything into existence. So this is contemporary, but this is Paleolithic. Now, I was just looking at it last night, and it's from Brno, and I might not be saying that right, but from what's now the Czech Republic. And it was so interesting that last fall, out of the blue, I got an invitation to go to Brno and teach a class. I couldn't go, but I thought, oh, how weird. After all these many years of showing this speech, I might have tried harder to get there if I had remembered this was from Brno. So here we have the same shape, and you can see it's also a vulva. And the oldest images made by human beings are depictions of vulvas. Now, for those of us who majored in art, these were not in Jansen's History of Art. And when I started to realize what the oldest images were that human beings made, the oldest symbolic representations of thoughts, and that they were vulvas, I was just sort of dumbfounded. And you can go online now and just search and find tons of stuff. But at that time, it was obscure and hard because they couldn't be exhibited in the museums because they were vulvas. So anyway, the vulva is also the gate, the portal, and these are all symbols that overlap. And this was colored red, the color of blood, with ochre, iron oxide, and notched around the rim is a lunar calendar. And this was actually in the grave of a male. So everybody, it was the symbolic ideas for all the oldest cultures that we find that we came out of the sacred void, the vulva being the passageway, the gateway, and we returned back into that source. And that really, anybody that wants to say that the oldest traditions aren't based around a goddess are just refusing to look at the visual evidence. That's it. The visual evidence shows that. And this is a Paleolithic, another one much more realistic. We have Virgin Mary and the mandorla, which is another symbolic representation of a vulva. Mary is our final remaining acceptable symbol for all of these traditions. Sheila Nagig, and this is from Ireland, but this was throughout the UK. These Sheilas were placed over the doorway of the churches, and it showed that you were going into the womb of the goddess to have your religious experiences. During the Victorian period, they had to take them down. So this is really our oldest religious symbol. This is it. And the first sound that we hear is the pulse of our mother's blood. It's not her heart beating, it's the pulse of her blood. And we'll hear that later, and it's really a different sound than the heart beating. So obviously the drum represents this first sound too. Not only the first sound of bringing everything into being, but it represents the first sound that we hear, that we actually take form to. You have to think about this. From the time that we're just a single egg, and then a fertilized egg, and just two cells, and from this very beginning, we are pulsing to this sound. There is no more powerful sound. For human beings, I think that all drumming is a reflection of this first sound. I also believe that this is the reason why the frame drum was the trance-inducing instrument for all the ancient mystery schools throughout the Mediterranean world, the most famous being Persephone and Demeter at Eleusis. But we had Inanna and Muse, we have Attis and Aphrodite, Attis and Cybele, Aphrodite and Adonis, Isis and Osiris, and we have Jesus and Mary. Now I have no texts that say this, but there were 3 Marys, right, that went to his tomb. Now, in all the ancient Mediterranean traditions, the frame drum was played as a part of the funeral rites. They had gone to play the frame drum at his tomb. And it's the ancient way of invoking the trance state for the death and rebirth experience. So I don't know if there'll ever be any way I can prove that, but I know that in my bones. I know that that's what they were doing. Where I started in all these research was by looking at the frame drums and going, what are the symbols on the frame drums? What are they? And I'm able to tell you all this in one big glop. And I might not be able to tell you all the details of how I've linked it together and all the research to make it so apparent to you, but I hope I'll be able to make it apparent as we look at many, many of these things. But it's by studying these things and studying the figures and researching and studying the mythology. These are all variations on the bindu and the expanding energy. This is a lotus that we're going to see a lot of, and this is a laurel wreath that represents the power to prophesize, the oracles. Many of the priestesses that were oracles also play the frame drums. The Pythia, who was called the bee at Delphi. All of Cybele's priestesses were also called the Sibyls, the great oracles. There is the lotus, and we know from the Buddhist and Indian tradition that the lotus represents the womb of creation. It also represents chakras. And we're going to see this correlation between chakras, which are also individually wombs of consciousness within the mind-body. Almost every time I go to Greece, I find something I've never seen before and never seen reproduced. And this is Athena. Instead of blooming out of the brain of Zeus, she's blooming out of a lotus. Of course, it just struck me that blooming out of the brain of Zeus would be also like blooming out of the seventh chakra, which would make sense for her then to be a goddess on the crown of his head, if you know the iconography from the Buddhist and Indian tradition. This is Neolithic Greek, 4 to 3000 BC, and a meditative posture. Egypt, I'm just showing the postures that we recognize today as being yogic from the ancient Mediterranean world. This is from the Minoan culture. And this is Cybele, one of the most prominent goddesses connected to all these traditions. Notice her lotus earrings and the Omphalos symbol on her crown. You're going to see that over and over again, the dot and the center of the circle. Now, if we go to the yogic tradition to understand a little more clearly, because their traditions are still intact, they talk about Shiva and Shakti is made up of the 50 seed syllables of Sanskrit. That is what she actually is. She is the sounds of reality, the seed syllables of Sanskrit, and they are considered conscious living entities. And she, under the power of desire, comes into being. She brings everything into being. Shiva is the void, and she activates and creates the whole universe. And that's symbolized here. And then Om can symbolize all of those seed syllables at the same time. So this is another depiction of this moment of everything coming into being and the 50 seed syllables all around the edges exploding into manifestation. Just like the Big Bang theory. It's just that in our tradition they talk about the Big Bang, but they don't say what causes it. No idea. It's a huge drum. And here's the bindu on the crown chakra. So once again, we've got this, and this is something I'm going to want you to start thinking and visualizing, this energy. If you've got this lotus, this crown lotus of the 50 seed syllables reproduced 20 times, you know, thousands of little buzzing seed syllables, what's that like? It's like a hive, right? A hive of buzzing bees. And we'll see that that was the way the Greeks also depicted this kind of energy above the head. Heaven's always thought of above the head. Heaven above and earth below. So our head is connecting to the energies above us, or the celestial energies, and our perineum and our feet are connecting down into the energy of the earth. And the human body is the connecting principle between heaven and earth. So this first sound takes place at the crown of the head and vibrates down, and the bija syllables settle on the petals of the lotus, creating the lotus and creating the human mind and body and all of reality. So it comes down. When she reaches the root chakra, she wraps around the lingam of Shiva, but I'm going to show you it's also the Omphalos, and she falls asleep. And it's our duty to awaken this buzzing, humming energy, because that's what she's described as. This serpent buzzing, humming energy, and bring it back up, enlivening and awakening each chakra, and bring it back up for a sacred marriage rite at the crown of the head. Now, in the Mediterranean world, you have the sacred marriage rites of Inanna and Dumuzi taking place at the hut on the top of the ziggurat. All of these traditions, the mystery schools, you have a sacred marriage rite. So this is really the marriage of the energies of heaven and earth within our own beings. So that's a more traditional depiction from a 19th century illustrated manuscript. This is a contemporary illustration. You can see that there's 3 major channels, 1 down the center and 2 on each side. These are connected to the right and left hemispheres of the brain. You can see the chakras being depicted as lotuses. Now here's the other aspect. As the individual seed syllables settle down on the petals, they also vibrate different specific parts of your mind and body. So the throat chakra has all 16 vowel sounds in Sanskrit. So this is the right cheek, left nostril. It's basically the face and the head. So there's an ancient practice called the garland of letters, where you chant through each one of the seed syllables, and you're vibrating every part of the body that you can see like this. This is where the seed syllables also sit in the body. It's a very powerful text. The interesting thing is I look back over my life and see all the threads that came together that enabled me to understand what I was seeing and what was in front of me. Because for years I was involved in yoga, and I recorded a CD with my husband at that time, Amit Chatterjee, on this garland of letters. So we actually worked with this, we recorded it, and I really began to understand it. Then began to see it everywhere and understand it in terms of everything else that I was seeing from the Mediterranean world. This is Egyptian. This is the goddess Hathor. She's sitting in a lotus playing to Horus, her consort. Another depiction of her. And this is Cybele. I told you we were going to see a lot of Cybele. I had this image for many years, and then when I purchased it to put it in the book, they sent me a picture of the back of the drum.
Oh, nice.
So it's just piece after piece. Now this is from Chatal Huyuk. This is around 5600 BC from what is now Turkey. It's ancient Anatolian, and I'm becoming more and more convinced that Anatolia is the site of maybe the oldest of human civilizations. They've excavated something now that's 10,000 BC. It took me years of looking at this. This is called a birth-giving goddess. It was in a shrine room. But look at this umphalos symbol right over the womb area. But also look at it's like the chakras right above it. And the whole Nadi Chakra, which is, the Nadi Chakra is the energy field around you. So it took me years of seeing that, but it's very similar to this. This is a traditional. So we're each sitting in this field, this Nadi Chakra. So there's a whole energy field created by the chakras around us. Now if you study the latest heart research, the heart puts out a far bigger magnetic field than the brain does. You know, we're actually sitting in each other's hearts fields in here. There, though, here's the same symbol on the frame drum from the Roman period. So over and over again, I find these symbols. Now this is Neolithic Greek. I think that one's around 700 or 800. But you start to see it over and over again. This is later, maybe 900. This is Priestess, and notice her Omphalos symbol. This is widespread. So this was a symbol that designated them a priestess, this necklace in particular. This is a big offering table from Crete. This is about a yard wide. Interestingly enough, I just read where an archaeologist was calling it a Kernos offering table. This is what a Kernos is, from the same culture, Minoan. So I don't know if flowers were put in that or liquid, but it was a part of, and there are depictions on the vases of women wearing them on their heads. So that vase would be put on your head in these ritual processions. These I recently found are Neolithic all over England. The same concept of these offering tables cut into rocks. This one actually is in Spain. It's all over Europe, these Neolithic rock altars. And then here, this is Greek. We have the Omphalos symbol on the coin. It's become a very potent symbol. And then this is the Tholos of Athena at Delphi. It's one of the oldest round temples, and we're going to look at the ground plan of it. Is an Omphalos. And let's see if we got the possible reconstruction. It was used as a prototype for temples in the ancient world, but then all through Europe and even in America, people build based on this particular temple. But here's a contemporary one in Ireland. Not real contemporary, maybe 100 years old, I think. What we're looking at now is the Omphalos. You'll also find this symbol on tombs. You know, like I've said all along, this is a symbol of death and rebirth, and people are buried with them. But it's also representing breasts. But this is a wonderful, what this says here is the handmaid and august priestess of the mother of all things is buried in this tomb. Sharastrati, whom her husband loved while she was alive and grieved for when she died, but she left the light blessed in having seen her children's children. And she was priestess. Well, it says she was a priestess, but, and there she is with her frame drum playing to the goddess on her tombstone. This is also another tombstone from Athens, probably 700 to 500 BC. The lotus Omphalos breasts on there. And just a couple of medieval depictions where you see the breast is clearly the Omphalos symbol. Cycladic, probably around 1000 BC. And once again, it's an idea of a pitcher pouring out sacred liquids as the breast would. This one and this one are cycladic. Anywhere from 2500 to 1500. Very old symbols. Now this is Greek. This is later. But they're, I love this because they're, women are, it's actually a funeral. They may be tearing at their hair. It's a funeral procession. But we have the six-pointed lotus. This is Mycenaean, so this is 1500, around in there. And these are all from a woman's grave goods. I think they were sewn on a cloak she was wrapped in. And guess what? It has been also identified as a butterfly, but
I don't think so. It's got stripes.
These are priestesses. She's holding a mirror. She's got her frame drum with bindu on it.
What is the mirror?
Well, that's interesting. it's used in ritual after ritual throughout the Mediterranean culture. And in Egypt, they had the dance of Hathor with the mirrors, where they were probably reflecting sun as they danced. In Buddhism, a mirror on your shrine represents the void. So it could be the void. It reflects everything. And in Buddhism, the practices are to clean the mirror of the obscuration so that you can purely reflect everything as it is without your own personal interpretations. So just more of the Greek. This is so beautiful with the cranes on it. More of the rituals with the bindu. This is Cybele. She's got her Omphalos bowl, like this red bowl that we showed you. Now, one thing I haven't talked about yet is the Omphalos is also a mound, it's a beehive, and it's also a tomb of the serpent that represents Gaia. So that's another aspect of it that we're coming into. There's the lotus on this Roman frame drum. Another of Cybele. Here, the crescent moon, new moon. It's rising over her shoulder. And she's holding the drum up like a full moon. So that was another symbolic meaning of the drum, that it was the sun and the moon. We're going to do Tratak this afternoon, which is a practice of concentrating on a dot. You can do it on the sun and early dawn or sunset or on the full moon. I'm going to ask you to do Tratak on the moon, and we'll go over all that today. But there's something very potent and powerful when you do it on the full moon. And I can't tell you what it is because I want you to have the real experience. Write back to me and tell me what your experience is from doing this practice on the moon. Cybele with her Omphalos bowl. And again, just over and over again. Same Cybele. This is an altar of Cybele with Demeter and Persephone. Persephone has her torches. Demeter. This is an actual altar about this big where offerings would have been made. So these are the libation bowls. These are the Omphalos bowls. They're also called fiales and pateras. Those are ancient words for them. So you've got the Omphalos, the mound in the center. You've got the lotus. Omphalos bowls. Male and female spiritual leaders use these bowls. They are so common in museums. Almost every museum has these. Each one of us needs to have an Omphalos bowl. We have to figure out where we can get Omphalos bowls.
Out of gold.
Yeah, I prefer mine out of gold. Yes, that's true. This one actually has a frame drummer playing on it. It's not a completely an Omphalos bowl because it doesn't have the, some of them were flat and you just had to balance more carefully, but most of them have the indentation for your fingers to fit into. This one I just found.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that incredible?
It's beautiful.
And then here, I just found this. She's got her frame drum with the bindu. She's got her Omphalos bowl, and this okino, which we'll use this afternoon, is the vase that you pour in to the fiale, the libation bowl, before you pour your libation. So there is, that's the ritual taking place right there. That's South Italian. This is a cemetery scene from making offerings, going to the cemetery and making offerings to the dead, pouring libations over the Omphalos at the grave site. And this is Apollo and I believe Artemis there.
It's the little symbol on the top.
That's a bull. That's another, I don't know if I go into it in this lecture, but the bull is often a symbol of the uterus. Also, in the ancient world, they thought that bees came from carcasses of dead bulls. So this is another symbol that's connected to the bees and the womb. That was smart of you. It's like bursting out of my mind, but I'm trying to be coherent to make sense. And also, this workshop today is to be experiential, but I want you to see the evidence, the information that is going to stand behind the practices that we're doing. This is the tripod that the Pythia sits on and gives her oracles at Delphi. And there's the symbol of the umphalos on the other side of the coin. These are coins. I got into collecting images of coins this week. So there she is, sitting on her tripod with her laurel wreath in her hand with her umphalos bowl.
So is she giving a reading?
Yeah, she's going into, and here's Apollo. This is from Delphi also. Making a libation, sacred bird. We're going to see sacred birds and sacred serpents a lot connected to these rituals, which goes back to the roots of shamanism, where there's a serpent that goes into the underground world for you, and there's a bird that flies off into the heavenly realms to get information and bring back to you. This is Demeter with the crown, and Persephone making the libation with the torch. This is also Alexios. This particular type of vase is a grave offering, and they're usually white. It's probably just the lighting that's turned that yellowish in this photo. This I just found, it's a Priestess Ursia, Roman priestess with her umphalos bowl and her sistrum. And we will use the sistrums this afternoon. This is from the Met. I feel like this is mine. And it might be because I've been looking at it for years and years. Or it might be because it was mine. But it's beautiful, and it's gold, and it's got acorns, beech nuts, and bees on it, which Hesiod said represented the abundance of heaven and earth. We're looking at it from the bottom. The bees are here on the edges. That's it from the other side. And this is it from above. You can only really see the bees here. There were a number of these kind of gold omphalos. And there was another one, two more just like that other one I just showed you. And they were from Italy. This is from Assyria. This is Mesopotamian, about 1000 BC. And you've got the lotus bowl, and now you've got the tree of life. This is the next big symbol connected to the umphalos. In fact, I haven't mentioned what the word umphalos means. It means navel. So the umphalos is the stone at the navel of the world. And if you think about how we take form, it's from our navel. The whole mind body takes form. So out of the umphalos grows the tree of life, which is the spine. And here from what's now Pakistan, we've got the umphalos stupa, lotus, with the tree of life growing out of it with the 7 dimensions of the chakras. Very clear. I mean, they're very clear about that. This is Sumer in about 2000 BC. And it's the intertwined serpents around a central column, just like the... Yeah, exactly. The AMA symbol, but it's also just like the channels in the chakras that I showed you. And this is a symbol of health and well-being, a balance between heaven and earth, male and female, physical and spiritual. Also, there's a connection with Moses' staff, the serpent that wraps around this central column and then can manifest extraordinary experiences. This is pre-dynastic Egypt. So this is so widespread. This is Navajo.
Wow.
This is actually a sand painting from early 20th century, probably. And these were done in rituals and trance. And the medicine people that made these had to have them memorized. They made this just from the archetype within their minds. And this Medusa, the AMA symbol, Shakti. This is from India. So now we get to the next step of that energy. It fell asleep at the base of the spine, at the umphalos. And then we have to wake it up, and it travels back up to the crown of the head. Here's about 700. This is archaic Greek, and this is a priestess. And this depiction, the serpents on either side of her. And this, once again, you see the central channel with spinning energies. This is Dia Syria. And this is the goddess of what's now Syria. God, we need to call her down and put some blessings on Syria. So sad what's happening there. The thing about Dia Syria here is she's wrapped. The coiling of the serpent's a very important thing. 7 coils, and her face is actually in the open mouth of the cobra here. And Dia Syria is connected to the frame drum. Oh, and also there's an egg stuffed in each one of these little coils. You can't see it, but another depiction of her. And then just again, touching back on a contemporary representation of the chakras. And now we're looking at the root chakra. And here we have Kundalini Shakti wrapped around what's considered the lingam of Shiva and fallen asleep. But it's the same shape as the umphalos and the bindu. So there's another depiction of it. She falls asleep with her mouth, her head in the opening, like her mouth is covering the channel of the Sushumna. That's the main channel that the energy has to rise up and down, so it's blocked. This is a folk representation of Shakti wrapped around Shiva. It's another depiction. And another one. This is from Delphi, the serpent wrapped around the umphalos and the laurel wreath representing the power to prophesy. But I want you to see that here we have the same symbols. We have the same symbols. This is from Pompeii in what's now Italy. The same thing, the serpent wrapped around the umphalos. That's the umphalos in Delphi, that was found in Delphi. And it's often said that that's a net wrapped around it, but it makes me think of the Queen's Cone. So it's supposed to be many things, and one of the things it's supposed to be is a beehive. This is a stupa from India. So we know that they were tombs. This is from Mycenae. This used to be called a treasury, Atreus, but it's now being called the Beehive tomb of Clytemnestra. I was in there, and it has a wonderful echoing sound, and we were able to do Bhramari in there. You're not supposed to do rituals or anything, and the Greeks and Romans do not like that. The Greeks really, they'll stop you instantaneously, and so you have to like sort of sneak around it.
But you are allowed to walk in there.
Yeah, it's an archaeological site.
Okay.
Yeah, and people might come in while you're in there, but nobody came in while we were in there. This is from another grave offering. She's lamenting at the Omphalos. This is another coin, and now you see the cornucopia is between 2 Omphalos. A sacred bird sitting on the Omphalos between 2 priestesses. This is Orestes, who has desecrated the interior of the Pythia's shrine. She's horrified. He's come in and he's clinging to the Omphalos for protection, to be protected from the Furies for having done all the bad things he did. Killed his father and everything else he did. This is from Eleusis, the procession and the Omphalos. I forget how many miles it was between Athens and Eleusis, 12. Anyway, they would go in a big procession all the way playing frame drums after they fasted for 9 days. Then they think they took some kind of hallucinogenic, but you don't really have to take much of anything if you fasted for 9 days and then processed for all those miles with drumming and gongs. And You'd be completely altered. This is a new thing, and looking at that symbol there in her hand, which is a pomegranate, which is another symbol, another fruit connected to all these symbols, and there's another depiction of it. So you've got the gateway into this womb of many, many seeds. So as soon as I found this, I Googled bees and pomegranates, and it's a very specially beloved blossom of the bees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to just look at everything. Now this is going to take a little bit of concentration. This is the Omphalos underneath the tree of life, and here you can see that it's really the spine. It even looks like vertebrae. And on one side, that side over there, stands Dionysus, and on the other side stands Apollo with one of the Muses playing the frame drum behind him. They're clasping hands. That's just a drawing, so you can see that a little bit clearer. This is, as far as I believe very clearly, a representation of the way the ancient Greeks perceived the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So they sort of perceived our consciousness sort of split under the control of two deities. Apollo, left brain, lord of the light, reason, logic, linear thinking. Dionysius, lord of the right brain, the dark, the holistic, the intuitive, the ecstatic, the irrational, the unbounded. But they are bound together by the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. I believe all of these practices, the practices of yoga that I've studied, the meditation practices from Buddhism, the end point is to create more and more coherence between the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and also to drive the brain waves down into alpha and then lower into theta. And this is just an amusing way of looking at the right and left brain. This was even more amusing, I think. Our culture really has valued the left brain far more than the right brain. And, you know, I think that we need to bring that into balance more.
Now I understand why I'm so uncomfortable working in an office.
Yeah.
I'm left-handed.
Yeah, I'm left-handed too, and I can't work in an office.
Well, I'm right-handed and I can't work in it.
Yeah, me
It can be either hand, that can be a
Right,
problem.
It's the atmosphere of the office. I think there could be a radical reorganization of how work is done. Not fluorescent lights, not all air conditioning. But here is another aspect I want to get to. The rhythms of our thoughts, they are being measured by EEG machines. We have fast, outwardly focused thoughts. They consider beta. If we close our eyes and just relax a little, our thoughts slow down and go into alpha. And then below that is theta. Now theta is very interesting because this is where extraordinary experiences occur. We can have a spontaneous solution to problems we've been working on trying to solve for a long time if we have a predominance of theta. Or we can actually manifest extrasensory perceptions. We get to see into the future, the past. This is where people with a predominance of theta have an experience of feeling at one with everything. The problem is, it's really hard to stay in theta. It's also expanded states of learning and spontaneous physical, mental, and emotional healings. But you can't stay in theta because it's right above delta. And so normally we only experience it when we're falling asleep or waking up, and we have those strange, really strange few seconds of hypnagogic dream imagery where the conscious and the unconscious minds are interfacing with each other. But people that have practiced like a Zen meditation, cutting the thoughts, not the visualization, not like the Tibetans are visualizing gazillions of worlds and a grain of sand. because that activates beta much more. But if you're doing cutting thoughts, returning to the source, and we're going to work towards that today with our Bhramari and Cream, and letting the mind be without thoughts and not struggling to have any thoughts. Once you do Bhramari, it's almost like cuts out your thoughts. So staying in this state, though, takes a lot of practice, because most of us just like fall asleep and fall right down through theta into delta. So me, I can vouch for that, being on long meditation retreats and just falling asleep over and over again on my cushion. So it takes 15 to 20 years of practicing to be able to do that consistently. And there's another way to do it, by having your brainwaves auditorily driven into theta by a rhythmic sound, i.e. drumming. This is why we see drumming at the core of the ancient Mediterranean religious traditions and many traditions around the world, in Africa and Brazil, and in India and other places. There are actually use the sound to first unify everybody's consciousness together and then drive it down into a state of theta. But at the same time, often people are doing very simple dance steps, symmetrical, step to one side, back to the other, just repeating. In the ancient Mediterranean world, to pray was to dance and chant to the rhythms of the frame drum. So that's another way of creating this coherence between the brains. If you move to the right side of the body is controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain, left side of the body by the right hemisphere. So if you're just stepping back and forth like this, right, and then left, just back and forth, you're creating more and more coherence between the hemispheres of the brain. Then if you're chanting, that's activating another part of the brain and the nervous system. So that's why we see these rituals that would go on for days, these processions of drumming for miles and miles. I've been to a frame drum festival in Brazil based around St. John the Baptist, and a sacred bull that gets ripped to shreds and they're resurrected by the playing of many frame drummers. Dionysus, it goes on for a month. And it's like people, all their worries are just washed away, and their minds are really, it is a brainwashing. It just clears everything out and lets you start over again. So that's just more about that. Okay, then one other aspect is that the two different hemispheres of our brain have different rhythms going on most of the time. Under a deep meditation or musical experience, they can start resonating to the same rhythm. And then if you drive it down to theta, you can have both hemispheres resonating at the same time. So that's another aspect of creating more coherence. So all these years I've been looking at all this stuff, and I finally realized, the sixth chakra is the two hemispheres of the brain, with the bindu in the center, which creates more cohesiveness and more synchronization between these two hemispheres. That's what it's depicting. So you've brought the energy up through all the chakras, you've got it to the sixth chakra, and then it goes on up to the seventh chakra, and you have this illuminated state at the crown, the sacred marriage of Shiva and Shakti. That's like enlightenment. That's what we're talking about. And these are the energy channels. This is for those of you who are going to be drumming with me. We are really creating the sound through the energy, the chi, the prana, leaving our bodies, going through the drum head. It's not just that we're tapping on something. We're putting energies through the drum head. When the energy rises up, the lotuses bloom upright. And then at the crown of the head, you'll have Bhramari Devi. This is the great bee goddess from India, who manifests at a time of great violence and disturbance on the planet and attacks the violence and dissolves it in a swarm of bees.
And the violence is against women.
Yeah.
And that's who they come to protect.
This is Hrim, the mantra for the bee goddess. And once again, you start studying something, and so I find out the mantra. I studied all this stuff since I was 17, and you always hear Om, 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 right? Om is the big mantra. When you really start studying it, it's Om, Hring, Om, Hring, and they're equally balanced, they're equally important. Om is Shiva, Hring is Shakti. But once again, all of the attention and importance has been set around Om, Shiva. It's very interesting. But if you start studying it, you see that they're equal mantras, equally important. So that's the seed syllable, remember? We talked about the 50 seed syllables, that's one of them. And this is the yantra, the geometric representation of the bee goddess. It's got a lot of Sanskrit on it, and I write to Amit and say, so,
What's it say?
yeah. And he writes back to me, and he goes, it's Bharavi. When we lived together and he would play, whenever he'd start to sing a raga, I would go, oh my God, that one I love. He goes, it's Bharavi. It's always. So I was working with Vicki Richards on the mantra of the bee goddess, and she said, okay, here's 2 things that go with the drums that you've come up with. She played the 2 scales, and I go, oh, this one. She goes, it's Bharavi. If I like it, it's Bharavi. So this is Bharavi. The violin is playing Bharavi. Well, now the interesting thing is, in the ancient Greek world, the scale connected to the frame drum is the Phrygian scale, which is where Cybele is from. It's Phrygia. So the Greek political leaders don't like the Phrygian scale because it makes women unruly. They like the Dorian scale. It makes people sedate and controllable. So they're always writing against it's like rock music. It makes people ecstatic and unruly. And if I sit down with a frame drum and just play and I start to hum what I'm hearing in the scale, what scale I hear in the sounds of a rhythm, it's almost always the Phrygian. And maybe that's just some aspect of the frame drums give rise to the Phrygian scale. So when I was living with Amit, he goes, oh, the Phrygian scale is Bharavi. So anyway, when I write to him and I go, here's the bee goddess, what is it? He goes, it's Bharavi. Think about that though. It's Bharavi, which means it's the Phrygian scale, associated with the frame drummers and the Melissas. So in India, it's recognized as the bee goddess, same scale as the one that is associated with the Melissas in the Mediterranean world. Now, I just found that out a couple of years ago. This is the yantra of the bija syllable, Hrim. So different yantras. This is Bharavi, the bee goddess, and this is her mantra. This is the yantra of her mantra. Hrim, look at it. It's here. Hrim. H-R-I-M or H-R-E-E-M. And we're going to chant that. A yantra is the visual manifestation of Bhramari Devi, of this particular seed syllable. This is how it visually manifests. A mantra is the auditory manifestation of a deity. So Hrim is the auditory manifestation of Bhramari Devi. There's many meanings to it. It's a very powerful. It's connected to the heart chakra, Hridya. It's connected to the sun. When you chant Hrim, here's the ancient text. It's the call of the created to the creator to know the meaning of creation. So it's our call to Bhramari Devi to know the meaning of our lives. So when you chant Hrim, you're asking to know the deepest meaning of your life, the deepest way to unfold your particular dharma, what your particular gift to the world is. So that's a gift of chanting this mantra. So also, we chant it out in the beehives. It fits in very well with the buzzing of the bees. I know I'm piling all this stuff on you, but I want to give you a total grounding in all this. So this is depictions of the illuminated seventh chakra. Here's the serpent, and sometimes she manifests as 1,000 heads and thousands of eyes sparkling. This is from Greek, an illuminated seventh chakra. This is contemporary Russian Madonna. This I've known about for years, but I just realized she's holding a lotus bud, and her crown is a crown of lotus buds, and she has the lotuses all over her dress. A lotus seed pod. Little umphalos symbols in there. In Egypt, the seventh chakra energy is represented as a sun on top of your head. Now, those of you who are old enough may remember this hairdo. I slept on orange juice cans to get that. Now, I've tried to do a lot of research to find out where that hairdo came from, and there's no information out there. But it was very popular in the late 60s. You know, people go, do you think you lived in the past? And I go, well, I might be a reincarnated priestess of Hathor. Along with Farrah Fawcett and Marlo Thomas. And she actually has her own. Can you believe that? I love it. Is this all accidental? I don't know. I don't know. Look at that hairdo. That's a really specific kind of hairdo. That doesn't just happen. Here is a traditional depiction of the seventh chakra from an Indian text. So that's another way to experience it, like the energy flows up and flows down. If you go back and look, there it is, the illuminate chakra and the energy flowing down.
And then what about that beehive hairdo? I had to learn to do that in beauty school.
So this is when all your chakras are illuminated. And this is Persephone with the buzzing beehive on her head. The Omphalos is on her head. Now just so you see how big this is.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Now can you believe this sculpture? And I've never seen it reproduced anywhere. Has anybody seen this before?
No.
Never. Can you believe such a monumental piece of sculpture has never been reproduced?
So unusual.
And so unusual.
Where is it?
It's at the museum at Ilias's.
Incredible. It's gorgeous.
It's astounding is what it is.
It is astounding.
And there's her lotus earrings. And now we're going to go back to Chatal Huyuk, around 5600 BC. Actually, this is Hajalar. And this is when we first start to see these beehive headpieces. And this is a bee priestess written in linear B. Meli, which is still the root of, in Greek, Meli means honey. This is back to Hajalar. Aren't they? Neolithic Anatolian. Neolithic Greek. This one is male and female at the same time. It's a sculpture of Artemis, and she was always called the bee, and on the side are the bees, and really she's got lotuses on down here too.
What about the multiple breast thing?
It's considered multiple breasts. It's considered multiple gonads of bulls. Some is considered bee cones. I don't know what it is. Doesn't have nipples. It's a very specific thing of Artemis.
Louise Bourgeois, the contemporary sculptor, imitated that.
It's also more like what I call drum comb, because the worker bees are female, and if you look on a frame, they're flat, but the drum comb is coned. It's round like that,
Oh, okay.
which would be the male presence, but I don't know that it's that. It's just when I look at it, I go, is that drum comb?
I went crazy collecting these images of the bees on the coins from Ephesus, which was the big center of Artemis's traditions. So this is very famous from Minoan Crete.
Which is on the shirt.
Yes.
Ta-da!
We have plenty. any of those shirts? They're on sale for $12. This, I think, I forget exactly when this is. I think it's around 2000 BC. It's old. It's Minoan. Every now and then somebody writes to me and goes, those aren't bees, those are wasps. And I want to say, join the conversation, because there's a lot of people arguing about that. So I don't know.
Remember when I told you about wearing it out in public and somebody said, what is that, a bug?
Yeah.
And so I explained it. By the time I got done, I had like 5 people standing there.
Yeah.
Looking at your breasts.
Yes.
But this is where we see, this is also from the same culture and same civilization, the same time as a cylinder seal. Like you would stamp your correspondence with this. I love this. This is between 1000 and 700 BC. And we find this throughout the Greek islands. I forget which exact island this is from, off the coast of Turkey, but it was Greek city-state. But it also Egyptianized, if you look at the hair too. It's very Egyptianized. And this was a necklace. You can see there were a bunch of little bee things on there. This is from the new excavation going on Crete by Stampolides, the director of the Golan.
Aphrodite?
No, it is Ilithura. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but that's with the site. And he's calling this a bee goddess. If you can see her body, it says here the breasts and the body.
And the hair again.
Yes, the same hair. And now there's 3 bee bodies on this one. These are so beautiful. This has just come out of the earth. And this vase was there, and also an Omphalos bowl in these burials. He's calling this a 200-year dynasty of priestesses. And this is a period of time when they thought nothing was going on. It was the Dark Ages. But there was something going on. Incredibly beautiful jewelry was being made also. We can look at the detail on that. Same period. Somebody just sent this to me on Facebook.
Yeah.
It was from the Duke Museum. So those of you from the Triangle area,
Go see it.
go see it. Yeah. This is the Beehives from Athens. Greece is really the home of the most renowned honey in the world. I guess, people are going, there's others, Manuka and this and that, but the honey, even in the airport, to buy for small gifts, all the different regions, and Naxos, which is where I had the most amazing yogurt with honey dripped across it, and then what are the flaky pastries with honey and nuts and
Baklava.
I never taste anything because they make it with sugar here, sugar water, sugar syrup, and made there. And Naxos is one of the great honeys of the Mediterranean world. Yeah. And more coins from Ephesus. And also it's interesting because of the moon, cycles of the moons behind it. And this is from Ireland, St. Gobnet, great bee saint of the bees, on her Omphalos. They still have processions and ceremonies every year. This is from the same cemetery there. And you see the same kind of intertwined serpents with the heads of the saints that control the energies of the elements, which I didn't talk about that because there's just too much to talk about. But the different chakras are connected to earth, water, fire, air, and space. Then we're going to talk about how does this energy rise back up? So it's asleep at the base of the spine. How do we wake that energy up? And it's woken up through rhythmic sound, chanting, drumming. And here are 2 priestesses playing over the vegetation to bring it up out of the ground. I love this vase. I love this. The frame drumming Melissas. This is 2000 BC, Mesopotamia. This is Hathor and the lotus. This is Egyptian priestesses playing to a sacred tree of life with a bird in the upper branches. She's like doing a qigong posture, the same kind of posture that we were just talking about. Do you see that? This is the Brooklyn Museum. The label says, "Women scaring birds." Egypt with the sistrums. This is all Egypt. The hieroglyph for happiness is a woman kneeling and playing the frame drum. The sistrum is where the jingles come from for the tambourine. Lots of sacred significance to that. Look at the lotuses behind there. This is from what's now Israel and Palestine, 1000 BC. And this is the great archaic bird goddess Aphrodite of Cyprus from around 1200 BC. Cyprus was the legendary birthplace of Aphrodite, and her priestesses were famous frame drummers. Same Israeli-Palestinian. Phoenician. A friend of mine, his family is from Lebanon, and he is Phoenician. We were all Phoenician. This is from Cyprus, but you can see it's all the same. The twisted locks, that became like a style that identified these women. They had these twisted locks. Aphrodite from Carthage, once again Phoenician, the frame drum. A siren on a South Italian vase. Bee priestesses playing for an effigy of Dionysus, making wine, making mead. This is terpsichore. One of the muses, the whirler, she spins in a circle. This is an ancient title of these frame drummers, terpsichores, and I've got texts that describe the priestesses of Cybele from Phrygia that whirled in a circle playing the frame drums, which is where Konya is today, which is where Rumi was from, which is where
Whirling
the
drums.
Sufi whirling.
Yeah.
We did it. We did it first.
Yeah.
Here is Eros playing the frame drum. To Dionysus and Ariadne, remember, of the labyrinth, and the sound of, really, Ariadne's thread is the sound of her drum, is what guides you in and out. Of the labyrinth, of the initiation into the deep unconscious levels of the mind, and then can bring you back out again. Here's the Chartres labyrinth with the rose in the center. That's one out in New Mexico. Roman archetypal swirling. This is seventh chakra. Mary's heart. Now the heart chakra, anahat, anahat means the unstruck sound. It's the sound before everything comes into manifestation. With the beat of the heart, everything comes into manifestation. But it's a sound that you can't hear. But the texts say that the sound that's the closest to this unhearable sound that you can hear is the buzzing of bees. And Bhramari, that we'll learn to do, is a practice of the heart chakra. There's the heart chakra. So here we have the hexagon created by this double triangle, the balance of male and female, positive and negative, yin and yang. This is an altar to Aphrodite, priestess with her drum. Melissa's. This one's so amazing because it shows the back of the drum so clearly. I just found that. More Melissa's. Eros playing to Aphrodite. Pouring a libation, the frame drum, the ritual staff, the thyrsus. This is one of the muses, Thalia. Cybele with their umphalos bowl. The tree of life with the frame drum hanging in it and symbols. Roman priestesses making an offering of incense, fresh fruits, and frame drumming and music. This is right before the triumph of Christianity, which is this. We've got this sacred serpent and the tree. It's now become a symbol of, the evil that tempts Eve and brings the downfall upon humanity. And notice how large the heads are and how stunted the bodies. This is the beginning of our split between mind and body that we as Western Europeans predominantly have inherited.
And as the women on the floor?
Yes, they're only on their knees on the floor. Yeah, it's really,
At their feet.
look at this.
Yeah, between that one and the next
50
one.
years. 50 years.
That says it all.
That's 50 years difference. Of course, it took a lot longer than 50 years. And they kept threatening the women. And the frame drum never went away, even though they threatened to excommunicate you for playing and going to the grave side for your dead and playing. But this is from one of the illustrations of the Canticas de Santa Maria. I had this for years, and I just found out what it was from. So it's now thought that maybe the canticas were written by women because they're all anonymous. So these were these great songs to Mary written in the 1100s. The symbols persist, even though they get twisted. So Adam and Eve again with the serpent. This is 4th century, and you've got the 4 rivers going into the base of the tree of life, which is the 4 petals of the root chakra. Has four energy channels going into it. Up above, the sacred bird into the heavens, and Jesus up above. So the symbols are still there. It just becomes almost impossible to get up into the heavenly realms anymore, to awaken. Here's Christ hanging on the tree of life with the 7 chakras in heaven, 6 levels in heaven above. It's interesting. The symbols persist. This is 1500s in India, and she's playing, and there's bees buzzing around. You can't see this, and he's dancing under a sacred tree. Here you can see the bees. Mm-hmm. This is Brahmarananda, the bliss of Bhramari, the bliss of the bees. And it's a raga, although I cannot find anybody that knows what it sounds like. I've asked Steve and Amit. They can't find the scale anywhere, but this is the visual depiction of that raga. Mm-hmm. We need to find that raga because it manifests a woman playing the frame drum with bees buzzing around the sacred male deity. This is Renaissance. They just could not wipe out the frame drum. They tried, but they couldn't. The angels are playing to Mary here. This is a great Italian, one of the first great ballerinas, and she's depicted with her tambourine. French, 1790, Sicily, 1890, their frame drum. 20th century, I forget, this is one of the stands, I'm sorry. Uzbekistan, or it's one of the Western Asian cultures. Sister Morgan from New Orleans. This is turn of last century Mongolian shamaness and her ritual aspects. This is Mapuche, current day Argentina. Nubia, Afghanistan before the Soviets invaded. Brazil, Nepal. Here's where I'm heading in my old age. My students in Brazil, my students in Cyprus, the Mom of Angels, Mary on her frame drum. Decided Mary wants her drum back. And
I love this.
Deborah sent me this video this week. Did you all see this?
Yes.
It's the bees swarming on the sculpture of Virgin Mary.
Oh.
At a high school.
Yeah. It's on our Facebook.
Ta-da!
That's it.
Oh, we love
Oh, and here's our path: reveal, remember, restore, reclaim, revere, rejoice, and rebirth. And Cybele.